Morocco is the most magical country. It is so underrated. Imagine Aladdin, but only in real life. That's literally Morocco. It did not disappoint. The vibes were amazing. The people were super warm and very friendly, and the hospitality was unmatched. I have been to about 20 countries and went to 9 countries alone last year, and Morocco absolutely in my top 3 after Japan and Spain. So I think everyone at some point should go to Morocco, but because it's a country that is not as familiar to us, I think that it's important to know certain things about the culture and about what it's like to visit there. And so that's what we're going to cover in this video. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Mani J. I'm a board certified dermatologist and skin cancer surgeon, balancing a demanding career and 2 businesses, all while traveling to at least 3 countries a year and living an experience-rich life. On this channel, I share simple, realistic ways to make your life easier and happier. Today's the first episode in our travel series where we're going to talk about super helpful tips that you're going to need to know before you travel. So I thought the first thing that we could do is talk about safety. I went to Morocco as a solo traveler with part of a tour group. And while there were definitely some structured times during the trip where we had to do everything together as a group, there were definitely some times where I was by myself and exploring the cities on my own. So when it comes to safety, what I would say is, as a solo female traveler especially, I would say that things are safe if you stay mostly in the touristy areas and also are out during the day. I personally avoided being in areas that weren't very touristy, and I also avoided going out by myself after dark. But in Marrakesh, for example, I took taxis by myself, and I also walked around the major landmarks and things like that by myself. So just be smart and use common sense. I would say that it's better to take a car or taxi somewhere rather than walking on your own, just because when you're walking from point A to point B, you don't necessarily know in between that if it's going to be a little bit sketchy in certain areas. So overall, I don't think there was really ever a time that I felt unsafe. Like I said, I was smart about it and I was kind of conservative about it. So that's tip number 1. As far as the 3 cities that I like the best that you definitely need to hit, I would say number 1 is Marrakesh. That was absolutely my favorite city, and I would say to spend 4 or 5 days there. The second city that you definitely need to visit is called Fez, and that one I think you should spend about 3 or 4 days in. And then the last city is Casablanca, and honestly, Casablanca really just has like one major landmark, which is the Hassan II Mosque. It's a beautiful mosque, unlike anything I've ever seen, and it's the only mosque in all of Morocco that allows non-Muslim people to visit it. So it's definitely something that you need to see. And then also there's something called Rick's Cafe, which is the restaurant that the movie Casablanca was based after, and that one also is really beautiful and nice to see. But if you want to eat there, you need to make a reservation in advance. But that in Casablanca, I would say to stay for maybe like 1 day, like 2 days at the very, very max. The 2 cities that I visited that I actually wouldn't recommend going to, because I think your time is better used somewhere else, is I wasn't really a huge fan of Rabat. Rabat is the capital city. It's clean and there is a couple of like decent things to see over there, but truthfully, I just felt like it was kind of average, and my time, I would have rather used that time somewhere else, like maybe an extra day or 2 in Marrakesh. And then the second place was Volubilis. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Volubilis is an area with ancient Roman ruins, and if you're a real history buff, then I think it's worthwhile going to, but if you're not, then I would say that you should just skip it. Moving on, I want to talk about how to dress in Morocco as a woman especially. So Morocco is an Islamic country, but it's really progressive. So for example, even though alcohol isn't really allowed in the Islamic religion, they have alcohol, they serve alcohol at restaurants, they have bars, they have clubs, they obviously serve it at hotels. So it is a very progressive city, and they're used to a lot of tourists. Tourism is a big industry over there, so they are used to serving alcohol and things like that. But because it's an Islamic country, I do think that to respect the culture, it's a good idea to dress a little bit conservatively. Now, you don't need to cover your hair at all. And even when I went to the Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca, I was told by our local tour guide, who is a Marrakesh native, that you don't need to to cover your hair as a woman, but I did want to respect the culture, and I wore clothes that covered my elbows and my knees. So I always wore pants, and then I usually always wore long sleeve, and that really prevented a lot of stares. I think I heard that in Morocco, if you don't really dress as conservatively, people, like, nothing will happen to you and people won't really do anything, because in general, I felt like the Moroccan people, and my tour guide confirmed this, they're not really like aggressive or violent or anything like that. There's not really those kind of crimes, but people do kind of stare at you and you may get some unwanted attention. And so because I was traveling by myself, I didn't want any of that, obviously. So I made sure to dress kind of conservatively. Now, that brings me to my next point, which is the time of year to travel. So I went in January. Honestly, I thought this was a perfect time to travel if you don't mind it being a little bit chilly in the mornings. I didn't mind it at all because it actually made it easier to dress conservatively and to have like my elbows and my knees covered. In January, just to give you an idea, the temperature changes a lot from the morning to the afternoon. So in the morning, it would be like in the 40s, and then in the afternoon, it would be in the high 60s, and then in the nighttime, it would get again to be like the 50s. So you kind of have to be prepared for a lot of changing temperatures. I live in Southern California, and to be honest, our weather is kind of similar where it can change by 20 degrees during the day, so that wasn't really anything new. The one thing that I will say is that everyone told me this beforehand, or the research that I did, I saw this beforehand, but I didn't actually believe it, and now I wish I had, is everyone says don't underestimate the cold in Morocco, and that's actually very true. So for some reason, my Apple weather map told me that it would be like in the 50s and 60s when I was there, so I didn't really bring like a long overcoat or anything. I just brought sweaters, and I thought that was going to be fine. But when I got there in the morning, it was actually very cold. So even though it was like 40 degrees, it was in the 40s, and Apple never told me it was going to be in the 40s. And so it did feel pretty cold. So I ended up buying a long coat when I was there. Honestly, the coat is beautiful and I love it. And it's such good quality, and it was only $40. It was such a great find and such a great purchase. I found it at like a small little boutique in Rabat, and I was so glad that I made that purchase because it was such a great purchase. That brings me to my next point, that Morocco is a really affordable country. So besides the hotel and the airfare, which I would say obviously are kind of like pretty normal prices, once you get there, food is extremely reasonably priced, and so are taxis. Alcohol is a little bit expensive. I would say that it's sort of like the prices here, maybe a little bit cheaper. Food and transportation when you're there, and also buying goods is actually very inexpensive. So Morocco has a huge shopping culture. For example, Fez, one of the main things to do there is to see what's called the Medina, and the Medina is like a maze. It's the old city, and it's like a maze of all these little alleyways with all these markets everywhere, and those markets are selling like food and spices and things like that, but they also have a bunch of home goods, things like lanterns and rugs and clothing, and so it has a big shopping culture. That brings me to my next point, which is to make sure when you go to Morocco, bring an extra suitcase or an extra bag of some sort. Because there's such a big shopping culture, even if you're not a big shopper like me, I'm kind of like a pseudo minimalist and I try not to buy very many things, I still think that it's worthwhile bringing an extra bag to bring back stuff, because it's very inexpensive, it's pretty good quality. A lot of things are handmade, and you just kind of want to buy a few things, and it's really hard to transport. So I took a carry-on with me because I don't like to check any bags, and my carry-on was really full. But what I did do is I had a foldable zippered tote. It's from Tumi, and I'll link it below, but it was such a lifesaver because that bag is actually what I ended up putting the things that I bought into it. So I actually bought a gorgeous handmade rug whenever I was there. The rug is beautiful, and I'm obsessed with it. It was a little bit pricey. I will say the rugs are probably the expensive thing there, but all the other stuff is pretty inexpensive. And then I also got two very high quality cotton blankets. Well, they're actually multi-purpose, but they're like blankets. They could be a beach blanket. They can be a throw for your couch. They can actually be worn on you, kind of like a scarf or a shawl. They're just very high quality and were really inexpensive, like way less than what I would find here. So definitely bring with you an extra bag. So speaking of shopping, when you're there's a big shopping culture. There's a lot of markets like I was talking about. And one of the things that you have to know is that haggling is the norm, and haggling is actually the rule. I feel like a lot of the vendors increase their prices knowing that people are going to haggle with them and negotiate on price with them. So definitely bring your haggling and negotiation skills. If you want to try hard to get the price that you're looking for, then just kind of walk away and they'll tend to go down to get you to buy it. So what I would do is I aimed for 50% of what the initial price was that they told me. And then from there I negotiated. And I feel like if you end up getting it for like 75% of what they were originally asking, then that's pretty good. I just wanted to add one thing, going back and when we were talking about weather and how to dress. I kind of brushed over this, but didn't exactly say. I went in January, and I think that going in wintertime is really a perfect time to go. So somewhere between October and February is a really good time of year to go, because during that time, the weather is a little bit cooler. It's still sunny. Majority of the time, it's still sunny. Like for us, I think it was only cloudy one day, but it was really sunny every day pretty much. When you go in the wintertime, it is easier to dress conservatively. The one thing I will add is make sure that when you go, it's not Ramadan, because if it's Ramadan, which is a very big Islamic holiday, a lot of things are going to be closed. And I heard like majority of the sightseeing kind of things, like the markets and all of that, everything that gives Morocco its appeal and its character are all going to be closed. So make sure you don't go during Ramadan. I think that for this year, it's in February, but make sure you just look that up before you plan your trip. So talking about shopping and haggling, one of the things that you need to know about Morocco is that you will get mildly to severely harassed to buy stuff everywhere. So the shop vendors are really persistent about getting you to buy their thing, and to the point where they will follow you outside of their shop, like down the road. Like if you keep on going and walking down the street, they'll like follow you down the street telling you that asking you to buy their thing. And so you have to be ready for that. And they make their livelihood based on, tourists buying these things. So I can't hold it against them. They're just very persistent, but they mean well. They're just trying to make a living. So make sure you are ready for that. Don't let it wear you down. I knew this going into it. I knew beforehand to expect that. And so you really just have to like stand your ground. And at some point, if you really don't want the thing, like ignore them or just continue to walk away, or be kind of firm with them and tell them that you really don't want it. But honestly, even still, they'll keep on. So you just have to kind of walk away and ignore them. But yeah, it can be a little bit frustrating, especially because most of us aren't used to that. So it's good to know that going into it. I think saying la shukran, which means no, thank you, that's helpful. And you can say that to them to kind of help them to kind of stop harassing you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Speaking of languages, Morocco is a country that obviously speaks Arabic, but interestingly, almost everybody, in addition to speaking Arabic, also speaks French. So if you remember your high school French, you're in luck. You'll be able to communicate with pretty much everyone. I found that not that many people knew English. I would say I would say probably 60% of people could speak English, but definitely knowing some French words is really helpful, or even knowing and learning some Arabic phrases is helpful. So the three Arabic phrases that I think are really helpful to know is shukran, which is thank you, hello, which is salam alaikum, and the response to that is alaikum salam, and then that means like peace be upon you, and may peace be upon you too. And then the last thing is ma salema, which is goodbye. So knowing those three things, I think is really helpful, and always greeting like a person that you're interacting with for the first time with a smile and saying salam alaikum, and using a local greeting, I think goes a really long way, and shows people that you are respectful of being a visitor in their country. Okay, now I want to get into money and currency and tipping and things like that. So the Moroccan currency is called the Moroccan dirham, dirham, the Moroccan dirham, and you'll see it as MAD instead of USD. It'll be MAD, and $1 is equivalent to 10 Moroccan dirham. And so, like I said, it actually is very affordable as an American to be able to go to Morocco and go out to eat and go shopping and things like that. So, for example, a typical meal at a sit-down restaurant would cost something like around $7 or $8, like 70 or 80 dirham. And then if you went, like I went for my birthday, so I went for a really fancy dinner for my birthday in the United States, that probably would have cost like $200 per person, but in Morocco, it cost $50 a person, and that was like including cocktails and things like that. So it was a very affordable place to travel. Now, speaking of the Moroccan dirhams, it's something called a closed currency, so that means that you can't get the Moroccan dirhams outside of Morocco. So sometimes before I go to an international country, I like to go to the bank and I like to get the foreign currency and have that with me for when I get there. It just makes things easier and smoother, but you can't do that for Morocco. So what you have to do is make sure you bring your ATM card and also bring some US dollars in cash. So I did both. You could do one or the other, I guess, but definitely I would recommend bringing your ATM, and I would also recommend bringing dollars in cash just in case there's some issue with your ATM card, God forbid. Then you'll at least have US dollars to be able to physically exchange into Moroccan cash and be able to use that. So Morocco is a very cash-oriented country. There are a few places like hotels and some restaurants that will take credit card, but I would say that during the 12 days that I was there, 90% of the time I used cash. So make sure that you have enough cash on hand. So I was there for 12 days, if you don't really count my travel days. I ate at sit-down restaurants. Some of the meals were covered with my tour, and then I also did a decent amount of shopping. And I would say all in all, I think I ended up spending somewhere around $800 or something in total for all of the stuff that I bought and ate and things like that. So I would say a little bit less than like $100 a day. And that was like not me trying to budget or trying to like watch what I was spending. I was just kind of like enjoying myself. That doesn't include the rug. The rug was more than that. But overall, I would say if you budgeted, if you're kind of someone like me who's not super budgeting but doesn't want to be outrageous, I would say something like $50 to $70 a day is probably pretty good. While a typical meal is like $7 or $8 per person, up to like maybe $10 per person, taxis are pretty affordable too. So depending on where you're going and how far your hotel is from the place that you're going, I would say the typical taxi is anywhere from $7 to like $7 to $10. So like 100 dirham was, I think, the most expensive taxi that I ended up taking. But the hotels that we stayed at were pretty central and close to many of the landmarks that we had to see. If you're traveling solo, or even if you're not traveling solo, speaking of hotels, I would recommend not only getting a hotel that's in more of the central areas of the city, but also trying to stay in a hotel that's a little bit bigger if you're a solo traveler. What I mean by bigger is I mean ones that have more amenities, so things like restaurants that are built into it and other amenities like a gym or whatever, if that's kind of your thing. But the restaurant thing is a big deal because after dark, like let's say for dinner time, if you're a solo traveler, you don't really want to go out and like venture out by yourself into a taxi or walking somewhere to get food. I mean, maybe you could if you're adventurous, but personally I'm a little bit conservative and I didn't really want to put myself in any sort of sketchy situations, so I didn't. And so having a restaurant within your hotel, like staying at like kind of like a big, more chain type hotel that has a restaurant within it is kind of a nice safety net to have, because you know that whenever it comes to dinner time, instead of having to go out and find something, you can eat dinner at your hotel. Okay, now I kind of want to get into like food and culture type of things. When you go to Morocco, we were told by my local tour guide who's Moroccan to not drink the water and to only drink bottled water. So what goes along with that is, I personally, being a doctor, like I know how bad these GI illnesses and these like stomach bugs can get and where you tend to get them from. So I avoided also fresh fruit, which is a really hard one to do because the fresh fruit is really tempting. So the only fruit that I did eat were things that were peelable. So oranges and bananas, which actually were like kind of their main staple fruit there, especially oranges were really fresh and like everywhere. They have orange trees growing everywhere, like on the side of the street. But oranges are a really popular fruit there. So oranges and bananas I ate, but I tried to stay away from other fresh fruit because I wasn't sure if they were washed in their tap water and I didn't want to get sick. Ice, I actually probably should have been a little bit more careful about. And I think in other countries, I usually have been in the past. And I'm pretty strict. Like I don't really get any cocktails that are shaken with ice or anything like that. I usually will just stick to wine and beer, things that are already like in a container that you don't have to worry about ice. But I wasn't quite so strict about the ice situation, but fortunately I didn't get sick with that. But if you want to be kind of strict and make sure that you don't want to get sick, I would probably avoid ice too, but definitely bottled water. Our tour guide told us to actually brush our teeth with bottled water also, which I kind of forgot and I didn't do, and I just brushed my teeth with tap water. But again, fortunately I didn't get sick, so that was okay. Take that advice if you want to just be extra safe, is wash with bottled water too. I found that bottled water was really easy to get. They always had at least 2 free water bottles in each of the hotels that we stayed at. So, and that would get replenished every day with housekeeping. So that wasn't really anything that was particularly hard to get. And like I said, if you want to go out to like the store and get bottled water, it's super duper cheap. By 60 cents for like a huge bottle like that big. When it comes to the food was really flavorful and had a lot of spices in it, but it wasn't spicy. Chicken tangine is like a very classic, iconic Moroccan dish, and it's cooked in kind of like a clay conical pot, and that was pretty much everywhere. The one thing I will say about Morocco is it didn't seem like the restaurants really had that much of a variety in terms of like what you could pick. It wasn't really like us, like at our restaurants where there's like 20 different things on the menu that you can pick from. It wasn't as varied. So I ate a lot of the same things every day, but I wasn't mad about it because it tasted really good. One thing about the Moroccan diet, or like Moroccan food, I feel like it's really healthy because it's kind of like the Mediterranean diet. There's a lot of lean protein, so there's a lot of chicken and a lot of fish and a lot of vegetables. Like the chicken tangine will come with like huge hunks of vegetables. So I feel like it's actually very easy to eat healthy, and the vegetables are really flavorful because of all the spices that they use. My favorite part of Moroccan food and drinks and stuff was Moroccan mint tea. So they have a culture where like as a welcoming drink, like let's say whenever you first check into a hotel, like if you're going to dinner at someone's house, they'll serve Moroccan mint tea, and it's basically green tea that has fresh spearmint leaves in it, and it is delicious and I love it. And even though it's green tea, it seemed like it was actually decently caffeinated, so it was a really nice pick-me-up in the afternoon. Honestly, I had this like 2 or 3 times a day and I loved it, and it's actually what helped me with my jet lag the most, and I am craving it now that I've come back. I want to recreate that at home, and they have this really beautiful way of serving it. They have a very beautiful silver kind of ornate teapot that they serve it from, and they basically pour it, but instead of pouring it just like from a close distance, they like do it really far up, so you can see like the tea falling, and it's just really cool, and I love that. Another fun little thing about the Moroccan culture is whenever you're there, you'll see that there's stray cats everywhere, and they're really cute. And I even actually saw like a little box of kittens, and people in Morocco, like the local people, actually like take care of them, kind of like they'll give them food. Like you'll see that those little piles of cat food, like dry kibble for the cats, and they're really cute, but you shouldn't pet them, my tour guide said, because some of them, they're not vaccinated, and some of them can even have rabies, so don't pet them. But they're really cute to see, and my tour guide told us that the reason why they're there is basically to control like any rodent population, which I didn't see like a single rodent or mice or anything like that in the city, but the cats are to thank for that, and so that's why people like the cats, and they take care of them. Hands down, the highlight of my trip was going on a camel ride. So when you're in Morocco, you have the option of going to 2 different deserts. One is the Sahara Desert, which is actually very far away. It's about an 9-hour trip away from Marrakesh. And so a lot of people don't really have that kind of time built in. It's usually like an extra 3-4 day excursion that you need to set aside time for just to be in the desert. I didn't really have that kind of time. I was only there for 10 days, but in Marrakesh, I was there for 3 or 4. And so what I did do was a day trip to something called the Agafay Desert. And so I will link the tour below, but I did this fabulous sunset camel ride tour where they pick you up from your hotel. They drive you about like an hour to the desert, and they take you on this beautiful camel ride at sunset. It's gorgeous. The scenery is just so beautiful. And then they take you to this like really nice, like rustic desert camp where you have dinner, and then they do a show. There's like a big campfire. There's dancers, there's singers, and then they do a fire show at the end. And it was just spectacular and such a highlight. I highly recommend doing that. The last thing I want to talk about is taxis. So before, this is super important, but before you get into a taxi, you have to decide on the price with the cab driver. So don't get into the taxi without clarifying what the price is going to be. Because a lot of times, if you go to a taxi and you just say, hey, I need to go to this and this hotel, then they'll take you there. And then if you haven't discussed the price beforehand, then they'll give you this outrageously high price. And then I've heard that people like get into arguments and they like will scream at you. And so just don't do any of that and avoid all that before you even get in. Make sure that you guys can agree on a price, and don't get into the cab until you guys agree. So a lot of times there were a few times where the price was way too high that they quoted me first. So I just walked away and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just not gonna take you and take your cab, and I'm just gonna walk away. And then they were like, no, okay. And they like came down. So make sure you do that before you get into a taxi. Overall, Morocco is such a magical place. It is not only gorgeous everywhere you look, like I felt like every building I walked into was like even more beautiful than the other, and I couldn't stop taking pictures of everything, but the people are really what makes it so wonderful. The hospitality that they have is just next level, and they're really warm, honest people. In fact, there's like 2 times where I actually paid somebody too much money and they gave me that money back, and they could have very easily just taken the extra money, but they're just honest, kind, and very warm people, and I definitely think that all of us should have Morocco on our travel list, and not only have it on our travel radar, but have it high up on our travel radar. So hopefully this video helped you all, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and see you in the next one.